Howdy friends, so we're ranking 14 of the most popular post-apocalyptic worlds. Yeah, and you thought this was only a Fallout channel. So who are these 14 lucky contenders? They are Mad Max, Waterworld, Resident Evil, The Last of Us, World War Z, The Walking Dead, The Road, The Book of Eli, Planet of the Apes, Terminator, Fallout, Horizon Zero Dawn, I Am Legend, and Metro. Now, I don't have time to do every single post-apocalyptic world across all media, so I've excluded some based on my own personal preferences, such as I just haven't read, watched, or played any of them. Sorry, Snowpiercer TV series. Oh, and FYI, I like every single one of these. Like, all of these games, books, movies are great. So if I say anything that's discouraging against them, or you think I'm just being unfair, just know that, I like all of these worlds. If I didn't like it, it wouldn't have made this list. Sorry, 100. Everything I say comes from a place of love. And finally, while I know each of these IPs pretty well, and I did plenty of research on them prior to this, I can't pretend to know every ounce of lore for every single one of them. Except you, Fallout. You won't ever catch me lacking with my Fallout lore. But for the rest of them, if I get a small detail wrong, you're welcome to bully me in high school or do whatever you think I deserve for not handling your favorite IP properly. Originally, this was going to be a single video, but I wanted to do all of these worlds justice in the descriptions, and the video just kept growing and growing, so now I'm slicing it right down the middle and giving you the first of 8 worlds. So let's set the 4 criteria we're ranking these worlds on. First, ingenuity. Is the world original or innovative? Is it something new, or does it just follow existing genre tropes? World depth. Is the world broad or interesting? Are the characters, factions, or events authentic, or is it all just one-dimensional? Emotional appeal. Is the world genuinely sad or scary, or does it just tell you when you should be sad or scared? Each piece of media can get a score between 0 and 3 in each category, with a final single point category, should you check it out, where, if it gets a point, I'll direct you to the movie, book, or game I recommend checking out. Oh, and I'm ranking them based on their worlds, so that means lore, characters, backstory, events, etc. Gameplay, mechanics, special effects, pacing aren't really going to play as much of a role. It's the world we're here to judge. Waterworld versus Mad Max. These two worlds were originally visited in films, and something they have in common is they're actually much older. Mad Max originally launched in 1979, making it over 45 years old. It was one of the original post-apocalyptic films, with the first movie showing the world mid-collapse where resources were in short supply. Some semblance of normal life is still present in the first movie though, but in Mad Max Road Warrior and all later releases using this IP, we see a world after the resource shortages led to nuclear war, where Australia has been reduced to a desert, or more of a desert I guess. Mad Max inspired countless spin-offs, including 5 movies, a comic book, and multiple video games. Even the makers of the Fallout series credited Mad Max as their inspiration for the original post-apocalyptic role-playing game, an inspiration that was kept alive even in the later games. A little fun fact for you, the actor who played Toe Cutter, who was the main antagonist in the original Mad Max, was the same actor who played Immortan Joe in Mad Max Fury Road. I'll let you pronounce his name on your own. Sadly, he passed away before Furiosa was released, so he couldn't play Immortan Joe again, but I think it's pretty cool. This actor got to return to the series after 40 years. Waterworld launched in 1995, and it was a movie based in the year 2500, where the sea levels have gone so high the entire world is underwater. A fun fact about this movie, when it launched, it was the biggest budget flop of all time. It did eventually make its money back through VHS and merchandise, but strangely, its failure wasn't because of its poor ticket sales, as it was actually did really well in theaters. The cause of the flop was more attributed to the extremely high budget required to shoot an entire movie at sea. The majority of the sets were filmed in Hawaii, where the crew was plagued with constant storms and general bad weather. The director, Kevin Reynolds, later said that he would never do another movie that was at sea. Waterworld has now passed into the realm of cult classic, and personally, I'm a fan of it. It did get nominated for several awards when it was in theaters, and even had a video game spin-off, a novel, a comic book, and a Universal Studios theme event titled Waterworld, a live sea war spectacular. And not to date myself, but I've actually seen this live in California back in the 90s. Waterworld may not be a very relevant IP today, but I wanted to include it in this video to show a post-apocalyptic story can work, even if it's not based on the big 3, AI, plague, or nuclear war. For ingenuity, Waterworld gets a solid 3 out of 3 for originality. It really explores the concept of a world overtaken by saltwater and introduces clever concepts like dirt being more valuable than gold, pirates on jet skis, and large floating cities harboring the last trees available. For world depth, the world present is certainly interesting, but the story is kind of, well, the quest to find dry land is cool, but it doesn't actually explore much of what's going on in the world besides the first adult city. Everything else is just kind of these characters. Obviously, it's implied that more is going on than just these characters. I just wish I had explored more than just a single city. I'm giving it a generous 2 out of 3. Emotional appeal. I feel bad for the people living in this saltwater dystopia, but I feel like life in this world just must be a little boring. I suppose the looming threat of pirates, or smokers as they call them, attacking is a constant danger, but the world really isn't scary or sad, so I'll give it a 1 out of 3 in this category. Should you check it out? Honestly, no. I mean, you can if you want, it's out there, but there's still only a single 2-hour and 15-minute movie. Other than that, this IP seems pretty well and done. Waterworld has a total score of 6 out of 10. Not bad though for a theatrical flop.
Alright, a little post-video edit here. It has come to my attention that Waterworld at Universal Studios is still going. It's still a show you can go see. They do it every day or every week or whatever. I had no idea it was still going when I made this video. I had seen it in the 90s so long ago, it never even occurred to me that it could possibly still be running. The only reason I know it's still running is I came across a random YouTube short where someone had just filmed it and showed something funny from it. And I was like, wait a second. This looks a lot like Waterworld. And I looked it up. Yeah, still running. Who knew? Good for the IP.
Mad Max. For ingenuity, it's hard to see the originality of the Mad Max saga when it has inspired so many like-minded series, but it was truly original for its time. Even if you don't think the first 3 were that groundbreaking, the world was even more brought out in the Mad Max Fury Road movie. That movie was an absolute jaw-dropper. Fury Road also gives a great example of show don't tell in storytelling. See, it shows us how savage the world has become because society has defaulted to an almost childish level. They call places like the Bullet Farm, Gas Town, Aqua Cola. They refer to doctors as organic mechanics, which shows you they prioritize their war machines far more than their own bodies. This series gets a 3 out of 3 for ingenuity, and it deserves every point. World depth. If you had asked me to rate the world depth of Mad Max before 2015, I would have probably given it a lower score. But with the more recent additions of Mad Max Fury Road, as well as Furiosa, we get to see the workings of this brutal empire that's ruled over by Immortan Joe. In the opening scene of Fury Road, we actually see a convoy, which is supposed to be carrying water, prepare to depart towards Gastown and the Bullet Farm to trade food and water for supplies. I mean, I have a strict rule on this channel. If your world gives me details about trade relations between factions, you get points. 3 out of 3 world depth. Emotional appeal. This world shows humanity at its worst. It shows us the cruelty of slavery, resource shortages, as well as a complete lack of justice outside of the oldest justice system around. Might makes right. But it also focuses more on action and these fantastic contraptions, and less on the emotional aspects of war. It doesn't explore much more than just raider brutality. So I'm giving the Mad Max world a 2 out of 3 in this category. Finally, should you check it out? Yes! The Mad Max franchise is still going strong and even released its most recent movie in 2024. To start, I recommend Mad Max Fury Road. I know it's not the first in the series and not even the first chronologically, but it will give you a powerful introduction to the franchise. Don't pass up the games either. The 2015 Mad Max game is available on Steam and has over a 90% positive score. The best way I could describe it is repetitive but fun. Overall, the world of Mad Max gets a solid 9 out of 10, knocking out Waterworld and moving on to the next round. Next up, Resident Evil vs. The Last of Us. Resident Evil is a world-famous series that began back in 1996 as a horror game for the PlayStation 1. The original gameplay might not seem scary by today's standards, but back in the day, it had terrifying jump scares. I'm not kidding either. Like when this dog jumped through the window in this hallway, that was the stuff of nightmares back in the 90s. This series was made into multiple games, comic books, novels, and even live-action movies. But the one thing that they all have in common is the Umbrella Corporation. This evil corporation has begun delving into BOWs, or better known as bioorganic weapons, which can essentially weaponize living things like humans, animals, and even plants, and turn them into mindless, hostile zombies. Umbrella has their fingers all over the world, spawning things like religious cults and global pandemics with the goal of creating this new race of virally enhanced superhumans. The only thing that stands against the Umbrella Corporation is the always attractive, playable protagonists who are always a part of a bioterrorism squad. For ingenuity, Resident Evil games are great, and the movies are really not that bad, but the Resident Evil world is sort of one-dimensional. It's always revisiting another version of the same super attractive action protagonist versus zombie monsters created by the Evil Corporation. I'm giving Resident Evil a 1 out of 3 in this category. World depth. The world of Resident Evil is one with action and adventure, not so much world building. We don't have factions or groups outside of the very linear good guys and bad guys. However, when this series wants to set a scene, they really set the scene. Like in Resident Evil 4 and 5, we see regions of the world that have been taken over by this zombie virus, and interesting enemies that come as a result. Also, the locations are pretty unique from one another. 2 out of 3 world depth. Emotional appeal. Resident Evil is easily one of the scariest worlds in this genre. Some of the monsters that come out of this game are nothing short of nightmare fuel. Like, if this isn't scary, I don't know what is. 3 out of 3. And finally, should you check it out? Yes, it invented the action horror video game genre with the first Resident Evil, even if the gameplay is a little dated right now. Resident Evil 4 though, see, that game invented the over-the-shoulder shooter and was a phenomenal game that got a remake in 2023. Go play that one for peak Resident Evil. That means the world of Resident Evil gets a 7 out of 10. The Last of Us. I remember watching E3 2011 and seeing this game announced. The dialogue between these two main characters, Joel and Ellie, the way they could interact with the world, and the way the whole thing looked. Everyone had the hype. There was so much hype, I had to lower my own expectations for risk of just being disappointed because no game could look as good as The Last of Us looked. But amazingly, when it launched, it delivered. Everything we saw in the E3 trailer came to life when the game finally released. Just like Resident Evil, The Last of Us started as a hit zombie survival game that now has a Part 2 sequel, as well as a TV series that was actually very well received. I enjoy how The Last of Us has a touch of originality with a different take on the zombies compared to a lot of other worlds. See, instead of a virus, the zombie plague is actually just a type of spore that spreads on contact or even through the air. Once infected, a human just becomes the spore's method of reproducing. Over time, the human gets more and more overtaken by the fungus until they become almost unrecognizable as humans. As freaky as this sounds, this type of fungus actually exists in nature. Thankfully not for humans, but many insects are plagued by fungal spores that can take over their bodies and cause them to become spreaders. The Last of Us follows survivors Joel and Ellie as they make their way across the United States to deliver a potential cure to the zombie virus. Along the way, they visit many well-known cities such as Boston, Pittsburgh, and Salt Lake City, Utah. Surprisingly, the largest threat to them along the way isn't entirely the zombies. Don't get me wrong, the zombies are definitely present and dangerous, but the chaos spawned by the virus has brought the collapse of law and order. And Joel and Ellie have to see humanity at its worst as they fight to survive. Maybe the real zombies were the friends we made along the way. On the surface, this might look like your typical zombie apocalypse story, but The Last of Us really takes it a step further with their world building, especially regarding the cause of the virus and the human aspect we see after all of society breaks down. For ingenuity, I'm giving the world of The Last of Us a 2 out of 3. World depth. The world of The Last of Us has amazing writing for its characters and the cause of the zombie outbreak. But as for the rest of the world, you learn everything you need to learn in the first 2 levels of the game. Everything after that is the character's story. And it's a good story, but this is where the world building ends. The life you see for people living in one city is more or less the life everyone is living. There isn't much to explore unless the series introduced something new. That's why I'm giving the world of The Last of Us a 1 out of 3 for world depth. Emotional appeal. This game thrives on emotional appeal of the world. You feel scared and sad for the characters as they make their way across America. 3 out of 3 in this category. If I could give it a higher score, I would. And finally, should you check it out? Have you been listening? Yes, the TV series is great and the games are great too. The Last of Us gets an additional point, giving its world and story an 8 out of 10 and 1 point ahead of Resident Evil. Next, we've got World War Z versus Scooby-Doo on Zombie at The Walking Dead. These two are obviously alike in that they are apocalypses brought on by a zombie virus. The world of World War Z started as a book and, along with the title, described itself as an oral history of the zombie wars. It later released as a full-length movie. The Walking Dead started as an amazing TV series and later released as a not as good TV series. Starting with World War Z, for ingenuity, World War Z covers the events of a worldwide zombie epidemic from multiple perspectives around the globe. The movie, while really good, seems to be more inspired by the book and is not really a recreation of it. The book follows the account of multiple people after the zombie wars have already ended, as if they're explaining events as they experience them. But when it comes to adding to the post-apocalyptic genre, this story leans into existing zombie tropes rather than trying to innovate the genre. And that isn't really a bad thing. Leaning into tropes allows writers to kind of use a reader's preconceived understanding of the world. For example, if I was writing a book about vampires and I had to have the vampires avoid sunlight at all costs, I wouldn't have to explain to you why vampires can't encounter sunlight. I could lean into the tropes and just assume you know that vampires die in sunlight. That's what World War Z does. It leans into the existing genre tropes because we all know what zombies are and how they behave. World War Z is not trying to expound on the genre, it just wants to tell it in another way. That's why I'm giving it a 1 out of 3 for ingenuity. It's a zombie story not too different from the others that came before it. World depth. When I first reviewed World War Z, I started looking at the movie, and I think we can all agree that the movie, well, it was really well done, but after looking into the book, I realized just how in-depth the story actually goes. It covers everything from how the virus was unearthed during the construction of a dam in China, how it spread, and how the zombie outbreak caused everything from civil wars to immigration crises to a total nuclear exchange between two neighboring countries. It even covers the story of an astronaut aboard the ISS who claims to see swarms of zombies miles wide from orbit. World War Z goes into details about food shortages, new forms of martial arts specifically designed to fight zombies. It even covers the effect the pandemic has on trade. If your world gives in-depth details on trade routes, I'm giving you 3 points. That's now an official rule on this channel. The lore depth and believability of it all gets it a 3 out of 3. Emotional appeal. That opening scene in World War Z, where the pandemic first breaks out and Philadelphia goes into complete collapse, a masterpiece. I even found myself thinking, what would I do in this situation? Over and over again as I watch these characters push through the chaos in the city. It's really cool to watch. Meanwhile, the book does well covering the emotional experiences of what the interviewees just had to endure to survive. It even gives details of the Z-shock, which is a psychological episode caused by soldiers fighting the zombies for too long. I'm giving World War Z a 2 out of 3 for emotional appeal. Finally, should you check it out? Yes, plain and simple. I know I just said it's not very innovative, but it's a great book and a great movie. That opening scene in the movie where society collapses is, I can't say it enough, it's a cinematic gem that you should see for yourself, if you haven't already. 1 out of 1. That gives World War Z a score of 7 out of 10. The Walking Dead. I remember back in 2010 when The Walking Dead first came out, everyone, and I mean everyone I knew, was glued to this series. The Walking Dead brought the zombie apocalypse to a mainstream media in a way I don't think any previous series ever has. I knew people that didn't even know what sci-fi was short for, and they were watching The Walking Dead. It focused so heavily on the human aspect of the apocalypse and covered everything from relationship conflicts, domestic abuse, betrayal between friends, all of it occurring in the middle of an apocalypse brought on by the world being taken over by zombies. Walkers. One of the reasons for The Walking Dead's success was that it followed a set of interesting and well-written characters very closely, rather than focusing on the lore of zombies and how the plague started, the backstory, any of that. It was about the characters and what they were experiencing. My review here is going to be focusing more on the early seasons, particularly season 1 through 4, because those hold up pretty well. After that, I think the show ran into a problem where the characters actually got so adept at surviving in this new world, the way the writers decided to add conflict to the story was just have the characters make the stupidest possible decisions, all the time. Like most of the early fans, I dropped off around season 6. There are 11 seasons in total, so if somehow the series made a comeback, I wouldn't know. That's why I'm focusing on the early season. Ingenuity. The Walking Dead closely follows a wide range of characters as they find their way in this new zombie apocalypse that has taken over the earth. But, like World War Z, The Walking Dead is more focused on how the characters navigate the world and less on the actual zombies, the virus, or deeper lore. It doesn't bring anything new to the zombie genre, but instead leans into the zombie lore that already exists. 1 out of 3. World depth. The characters in the series go to many interesting locations, and the series does a great job showing just how humans have adapted to this new world, such as using things like sound traps to lure zombies into holes, or converting an entire prison into a base of operation. This is when the series is at its best, by the way, when the first factions start emerging and have to either work together or destroy one another. Spoiler alert, they destroy one another. The world of The Walking Dead has its depths, and it follows these characters very well, but it doesn't really go out of its way to describe an in-depth world beyond these superstars. It almost feels like the world's just waiting for someone with main character energy to show up and make things happen. 2 out of 3 for world depth. Emotional appeal. This series is kind of all over the place emotionally. The acting is good, right? It really is. But so many of these characters are just, they're so dumb. Their deaths sometimes feel deserved. We've all seen the meme of Grimes reacting to his wife's death. This was a sad scene, but it would have been more sad if Lori Grimes wasn't just such an unlikable character. I felt bad for her family, but not for her. 1 out of 3 for emotional appeal. Should you check it out? I know I'm hating on the show a lot, but it really is a good series in the first 4 seasons. If this were a review of character depth or just interesting characters, The Walking Dead would get a 3 out of 3. But I can't really recommend the series considering how hard it drops off in later seasons. If they ended it after season 4, I'd recommend it to you. But since it keeps going like a lifeless zombie, 0 out of 1. This gives the world of The Walking Dead a 4 out of 10. I feel like it deserves better because, again, it's a really good show, but scores are the score. World War Z wins this round. Next up, The Road versus The Book of Eli. These stories are both similar in that they take place in an apocalyptic world where the protagonist has to traverse on foot, and you, the viewer or reader, get to experience the world as they see it. Both stories also show the worst of humanity. Starting off with The Book of Eli. For ingenuity, The Book of Eli features a compelling plot with a few exciting twists, and the story focuses more on Eli's journey than it does on establishing any lore of the post-apocalyptic world. Though I have to give the movie credit because it is a great example of show don't tell in movie writing. For example, the constant use of sunglasses by characters is a neat touch, hinting at a weakened atmosphere and increased UV exposure, but they never explain it. You just kind of have to figure it out for yourself why everyone wears sunglasses all the time. The nuclear craters effectively show the world's devastation without any exposition. A few movie shots tell us all we need to know about how the world ended, though we don't get any details as to why or when. Ultimately, the film relies on familiar genre tropes without introducing new elements similar to World War Z, but I will give The Book of Eli a 2 out of 3 for ingenuity. World depth. The Book of Eli doesn't go into a lot of details regarding how the world ended, aside from the few shots I just mentioned. It does have these frequent nuclear craters, which obviously suggests some kind of nuclear exchange happened long ago. But did these bombs fall because of rogue AI? Did food shortages lead to a war that eventually went nuclear? Did an alien invasion lead humanity to wipe itself out in order to deny the aliens access to the planet? Well, we just don't know. All we see is craters. Or take this warlord, for example, Carnegie, who seems to rule over the town with an iron fist. How did he take power? Why does anyone even listen to him? We just don't get these details. He's the bad guy, he's in charge, roll scene. In a movie like Mad Max Road Warrior, this guy Humongous, it's quite obvious why he's in charge. He's terrifyingly strong. Everyone else falls in line. Mad Max Fury Road. Immortan Joe is old and somewhat weak, but in his youth, he built a cult of followers that were devoted and would fight for him no matter what. So even though he's old and feeble now, they still follow him. Carnegie doesn't have any such backstory. He's just in charge. Even the town so much of the story takes place in, which Carnegie believes is going to be the rebirth of society, doesn't even have a name. Now, maybe this lack of world building was done as an artistic expression, as to say, it doesn't matter how the world ended, who's in charge, or how they took power. All that matters is the book Eli's trying to preserve. And if that's the case, I mean, this movie succeeded at its goal. That's not a bad artistic direction. I can see some beauty in that, but the world's still getting a 1 out of 3 because there's just not much depth. Emotional appeal. The Book of Eli goes into great detail just to show how morally bankrupt humanity has become after the apocalypse. For example, this previously mentioned warlord Carnegie allows his henchmen to raid the region around his unnamed town. They also do so on motorcycles, which is kind of cool, but Gas has a shelf life, and I'm not sure how these gas guzzlers are really getting their fuel, but sure. Anyway, they're killing any and all they see as they scavenge for this valuable something that I'm not going to reveal. They don't care who they hurt or how they hurt them. We even have a scene where Eli, while encountering the evils of the world, starts to question his own mission and has to remind himself that the evil actions of every person will be made right in the end. As the story unfolds, you start to really feel for the characters that are being mistreated in this lawless society. Sure, maybe the villains are a little cartoonish. They're only motivated to do what they do because they just simply like being evil and know they'll get away with it. At its core, the Book of Eli is an emotional tale of a man navigating a broken world and doing what he can to help those who are most mistreated, while never giving up on his ultimate goal of preserving the Book of Eli. It gets a 2 out of 3 for emotional appeal. So, should you watch the Book of Eli? Well, it's a great film. I really like it, and it has 2 wild twists regarding the protagonist. But like Waterworld, this story is really done. I don't believe the Book of Eli will have a big impact on culture or the apocalyptic genre altogether. Even if I liked it, I wouldn't describe it as a must-see. 0 out of 1. Overall, the Book of Eli gets a 5 out of 10. It's a good movie, even if it has a low score here. The Road. This novel, and later a movie, is about a world that was destroyed by an unspoken event that caused Earth to become cold and lifeless. The event suggests it was a nuclear exchange, but it also could have been a meteor strike or a volcanic eruption that covered the world in ash. All the animals and crops are gone, trees are dying, and it's getting colder every day, and there's hardly any food left. The Road covers the journey of a father and son, some of the last survivors on Earth, as they journey south to the coast, hoping to find a warmer climate and a better chance of survival. Now, I'm going to do something different with this one and start with emotional appeal. See, The Road is sad. So sad. I literally stopped and asked myself, why am I reading this book? Simply because this was the most depressing story I have ever read. I wouldn't even say it has a good ending or it all works out in the end. No, the entire story is just sad the entire time. Now, there are scenes when some good things happen, such as them finding stashes of food or somewhere to be warm, but overall, don't read this book if you want to feel better about yourself. With that said, that's the whole point of the book. It's trying to be sad and emotional. It's trying to be depressing, and in that, it excels. 3 out of 3 for emotional appeal. If I could give it a 4 out of 3, I would, because when a book is trying to do something, and it does it really well, it gets points. World depth. Like the Book of Eli, this story does not go into much depth for the world. We don't even have the characters' names. They're simply referred to as the father and the boy. We don't know what caused the apocalypse. We don't know where the characters are, though some readers speculate it's in Appalachia based on the descriptions. Cormac McCarthy must have been a big fan of Fallout 76. However, unlike the Book of Eli, leaving out details, names, or backstories wasn't maybe an artistic direction. It was definitely an artistic direction. On the surface, it appears like a completely blank world where most of society has died off. Law and order is completely gone, and the only humans left are the killers who have stayed alive by feeding on the one consistent source of food: other people. Cannibalism is a huge theme in the story. The characters are confronted with cannibalism on multiple occasions, but refuse to do it because they want to maintain their humanity. I was honestly quite amazed by how well this world was put together, despite having so few descriptions throughout. World depth, 2 out of 3. For ingenuity, The Road covers a very gruesome story of a man and his son trying to navigate themselves through a dying world. It covers the brutality of an apocalypse, but it doesn't really add anything to the genre. It doesn't take place anywhere new or do anything to set itself apart from the others in the genre. 1 out of 3 for ingenuity. Finally, should you check it out? The Road is just sad. It's just really, really sad the whole time. I didn't feel good after reading it or rewatching the movie. I mean, look at this Wikipedia article describing the plot. I'll let you guess what this 4-letter R word is. Now, I'm not gonna say because something is sad or gruesome though, that it's somehow bad, but I am saying 0 out of 1. That's 6 out of 10 for The Road, meaning it will surpass the Book of Eli and go on to the next round. Would you look at that? We finished with part 1 of the video. Part 2 is mostly complete. I just need to compile all the visuals and it'll be good to go. So subscribe to get notified for when it's live and see who gets the title of Best Apocalyptic World. Who knows, it could even be you, assuming you're one of these worlds. Also, if you like thrilling stories like the ones I've covered here, consider checking out my novel, The Court of Bew. It has the brutalities of war, slavery, and monsters. But you know what it doesn't have? Viggo Mortensen. because he doesn't respond to my emails. Check it out on Amazon and Kindle. Be on the lookout for my next video. And other than that, I thank you guys for your time.